Okay, guys, we want to be respectful of your time, so we'll go ahead and get started here. Once again, thank you for coming today. We really appreciate you carving out a little time for us on this, and we're hopeful this is informative. We really kind of want to give you, some of you may know a lot about this project, some of you may know very little, so we kind of want to build from the ground up, tell you kind of why we're here, where we're going, and give you an update on some of the projects as we move forward here. So I really appreciate you making time. Once again, with this many people on the call, if you could go mute while we go through this, and then at the end, we'll make sure to leave plenty of time for question and answer with our team. So once again, thanks for coming today, and appreciate you making time for us. So I am showing slides, and I hope everyone sees those. Mike included them with the meeting invite, so feel free to use that also if you're having any problems. Or at the end of the meeting, we'll be glad to send them to you again. So, real quick, let's go through these slides. So here's our agenda. My name's Donnie Matthews. I work with the Department of Information Systems. I've been here almost 20 years, and I'm in our customer relations group. Our director asked me to be part of this project as far as kind of the outreach on the front end, which is what we're doing now. I do have others in the room with me, and I'll go ahead and let them introduce themselves as we go through this. So,
Mike Moran, DIS Project Management.
Debbie Martin, Data Center Operations Facilities Management.
And Rick Martin, Network Architect.
John Wright, Account Representative.
And we have others on our team that had conflicts today, but they're very critical to our team. Amy Buss is our CFO. She's a big part of this effort. Missy Moore leads our Enterprise Services Division. She's also, as part of this effort, helped put together the data gathering tool we'll show you here in a bit. Brian Fortson is Enterprise Operations Division Director. And Christy McKinnon is our legislative liaison. They're all part of this effort as well. So you can see our agenda here. Basically, it's pretty straightforward. We want to give you some history of the project and give you some current updates, and then talk about next steps. So, like I said, if you could go on mute as we go through these, that'd be helpful to everyone, and at the end, we'll be glad to open it up for questions. So real quick, when the governor came in office, I think he realized that the state was pretty siloed from several different perspectives. I think we've seen that through transformation and organizational perspective, but really from an IT perspective, it's been pretty solid for years, and it's just kind of always been that way. And so I think he thought it might be better to take a different approach, and so he reached out to our director, Jessica Jones, and asked her to work with a research firm, Gartner Inc. And for those of you that don't know Gartner, they're a very well-known firm, international company, and specialize in this type of work. And so what they did is they came in and benchmarked DIS and then really all of state government from an IT perspective as it relates to enterprise computing, data storage, data networking, and enterprise voice services. They interviewed us extensively. They also interviewed several of our larger agencies, about 17 of those. And then for the rest of the state, they did a survey, and some of you may have participated in that effort. They also visited our 2 data centers and 11 other agency data centers throughout the state. And so just to kind of level set here for some of you that don't know, the state currently has 2 data centers. We have one in our building, which is the MAC building, directly behind the Capitol. And then we have a backup facility over in West Little Rock. We call that SDC West. And it's a former Verizon data center that we purchased basically to provide redundant backup services. So what they did is they took all this information, they put it together in a report, and at the same time we put together an advisory group that was mostly made up of agency directors. And so Gartner presented this information to that group. At the same time, they identified opportunities for service improvement for DIS, and identified 6 alternatives for data center infrastructure optimization. So real quick, I want to stress that this project is related to infrastructure only, okay? So just to make that as simple as possible, think servers, okay? or think robust computers that are housing critical data. That's the stuff that we're talking about here. We're not talking about applications. We're not talking about taking over management of those. We're not talking about desktops. We're talking about critical data that sits on servers or computers out there today that the governor felt it would be best to house in one of the 2 state data centers. So they have evaluated the alternatives based on business alignment, operational excellence, risk, and cost, and selected the best strategy, which is why we're here today. They presented that to the governor. He agreed to move forward with this. So, real quick, here's a slide from the National Association of State CIOs, which is a group made up of CIOs from around the country. This was done in 2017, and you can see kind of where we stand as a state compared to other states. So the states in blue had consolidated from an infrastructure perspective, and some, decades ago, we've talked to a few of these folks. The states in green were actually in the process of doing so, and the states in yellow had kind of talked about it, right? And you'll see we're in the yellow phase. I think if you were to take another survey today, we would be a really light green because we're starting this project. And just so you know, we've got about 5 years scoped out based on Gartner's recommendation to complete this effort. So right now we're in the very early stages. We're in outreach, we're in data gathering, and so it'll take a while to get to that end goal. So you can see on this slide the recommended target state, kind of what would we all like to see out of this, and that's the statement there, which is the state should build a shared foundation for next generation digital government that all agencies can use for current and future services, right? So take the infrastructure headache kind of out of the way and let you do your business like you need to. You'll see to the left some bullets there to kind of clarify what that looks like. Number one, the mandate for all agencies to consolidate into a shared services environment. Once again, from an infrastructure perspective, we're not talking people, we're not talking PCs, applications, we're talking infrastructure. Replace MAC with a commercial co-location data center. So I mentioned we have 2 data centers. The MAC data center, which is in our building behind the Capitol, is about 40 years old. We're in a very public facility. The data center has kind of grown as needed through the years, and it's served us well, but it's not best case scenario for the type of data center we'd like to have. And so Gartner recognized really quickly that our best data center really is our backup facility, which is out west, the former Verizon data center. It's got a lot of redundancy built into it for those of you that haven't been there. It's got 3 generators. It's got a lot of security built into the facility that we don't necessarily have here today. And so Gartner said, hey, why not make that your primary facility, right? And also, you're really too close today, meaning our 2 data centers are about 6 miles apart as the crow flies, which is not best case scenario for disaster recovery purposes. And so they said, you got to get at least 100 miles away. And that's what we're doing. So this data center optimization project is really made up of a few smaller projects that kind of combine into one effort. One of those projects is procuring this co-location facility at least 100 miles away. We're actively working on that. We're working with a neighboring state, basically to come up with a reciprocal agreement to trade services. And we're really excited about that. I'll let Debbie Martin give us a quick update on where we are with that effort.
Well, we've been working with them since June. It's a neighboring state government entity, and we are just down to some legal issues and confirming network connectivity between the 2. But as Donnie said, it's going to be a reciprocal service agreement, so we'll host equipment for them. They'll provide space to us at no cost. So this is much cheaper option for us than going with a commercial co-location facility.
So that's one piece of this. The next bullet basically says invest in improving DI service delivery. One of the ways we're doing that is we're replacing our service desk software. It's our call center tool, basically. So when you turn in a ticket today, you either email the call center or you call 682-HELP, and our agents route that through the system internally. And it's an older system. It's pretty antiquated. And so we're replacing that. We're putting in a new and improved system, with the goal of giving you basically access to a portal to go in and make requests or report issues, and then having transparency as that issue is resolved or as that request is resolved, right? And so today you're kind of flying blind unless you call them, and then they've got to call somebody. So, you know, we've got some technology out there today that can really help with that, and we're looking at implementing that pretty quickly. It mentions the cloud here. The cloud is another thing we're looking at. You know, we're going to have these two facilities, but at the same time, we want to take advantage of the cloud that's out there through some of the things, you know, you've probably seen in commercials with Google and Amazon and Microsoft. If we have certain types of data that's not critical, maybe it makes sense to send that to the cloud. So that's something we're looking at through this as well. And then we also want to improve our staff and skill alignment based on the roadmap, right? So if we know we've got growth in infrastructure hosting, that's where we want to plan for our skill set to grow. On the right side of the slide, you see if we do this the right way, and I say we because this is a team effort including you, what should the state get out of it, right? Well, first thing, improve security. Security today is all over the map, and it's really critical as custodians of this citizen data that we have a very secure environment. So we want to improve that through this effort. We also want to have disaster recovery optimized, right? We do a little bit today, but not as well as we should. And so in the event of a disaster, you know, make sure that data is recoverable and recoverable quickly. A cohesive statewide strategy, you know, what if we're all on the same page doing, kind of heading the same direction, right? What's that look like? And there's several bullets there. Of course, you have the slides, you can look at it. One of the things you'll see down towards the bottom that kind of stood out to us as a team is Gardner came in and said, hey, you know, you're really, as a state, spending about 25% less than we feel like you should to be as efficient and as effective as you could be. And one of the things they noticed is that we've got a lot of obsolete or end-of-life technology out there today. And so budgets are tight. That's one thing we're going to talk about here in a little bit, because I know several of you might want to do things a different way, but you can't afford it. So we want to address that as we go through this. But, you know, things get in place. People don't have the resources, either financially or the manpower to do anything about it. And so the next thing you know, it becomes an issue. And so we really want to resolve that through this effort. So that's why we're here, and that's why you're here. We decided early on that, number one, we couldn't do this alone, and we definitely couldn't do it without your input and assistance. And we talked to several other states. We talked to Gardner, and they recommended what they call this push-pull methodology, which is really your agency provides the push team, and DIS is the pull team, right? And you can see on this slide the kind of the responsibilities for each. As a push team member, you understand your unique technology, right? We know technology at a high level, but you know how it impacts you at where you are at your agencies. You also understand your business issues, right? What's important to you as a business? Why is that important? How does that affect your end users? That's where we need your expertise. And then we really want you to advocate for your agency's interests. At the end of this, what shouldn't happen is you have less service than you have today. We don't want that, right? We want you to have a better service on the back end, and hopefully it's something that's better for you, better for your citizens, your constituents, and your leadership teams. What's our goal, right? Really, it's to listen and to learn from you. We want to take in your information and make sure we incorporate that in the final design. One thing I mentioned, there were several smaller projects going on as part of this. One of the really big ones is we are working to bring in a systems integrator, which is think big IT company, right, to come in and help us do this. And they have a few different goals. One of their tasks will be to define this future state architecture, right? You see that last line says incorporate push team information into final design. We don't know what that looks like yet. So, you know, we didn't come in with a solution in place. That's why we really need your input, because we're going to task that integrator to develop that final design, and they're going to need your input and your data to do that. I'll let Debbie, once again, kind of give us an update on that effort. kind of where we stand with that.
Okay. We received responses to the RFP that was published back late fall. We received 5 responses. They went through an evaluation process. 3 were selected for presentations, and those presentations have been completed. We're just awaiting some clarification information, and hopefully we'll be able to have the contract awarded and the systems integrator start work in May.
So that kind of leads into our next phase of this effort, which is really the data gathering phase, okay? And Debbie mentioned that we're going to have the integrator on site in May. What we don't want them to do is sit here twiddling their thumbs, right, kind of as we waste money with them doing that.
Because they have about 9 months to do the design of our new shared services, architecture, and infrastructure.
Right, and so we want to arm them with as much information as we can so we can hold them accountable really to achieve these tasks that we're going to put on them. And a big part of that is data gathering, right? We've got to get some information from you guys, and so that's what we want to talk about next. So, once again, this is, why are we doing this? It's collaborative. Man, you're part of this team, we're part of this team. In order for this to be successful, let's think from a statewide perspective, right? Let's put on our state glasses for a second as a taxpayer and say, okay, how can we make this work and get the most out of this for the state? So, I mentioned we got to get some information from you, right? What type of information? Well, at a high level, this is what that looks like. So, and then I'll go in a little bit and get a little bit more into the detail. But funding, right? How do you receive funding today? That's a critical piece to this. We recognize that some of you may be sitting there today, hey, I'd love to use DS for all my stuff, but I can't afford it. I've had that conversation a few times. So we get it, right? And so that's why Amy's on our team, our CFO. And really what she's trying to gather is the overall cost for this, because we think if we do this the right way, there's cost savings to be had if we look at it from a statewide perspective. So she's working directly with the State Office of Budget. They're very aware of this effort. We have support from the governor. And so try to think of this not as it is today, but as it could be. Meaning, if cost has been a limitation in the past, as a team, how do we get over that hump, right? And who do we need to talk to resolve that? So we're committed to working with you on that effort. Contracts. What contracts do you have in place today that we need to be aware of, right? And what contracts do you have in place that maybe we can utilize? One of the things, we've met individually with about 55 different agencies, and we're starting to see some recurring themes as far as contracts goes. You know, there may be 15 agencies that have a contract with the same folks, and they don't know it. So what would that look like if we all went in together and worked together and had some buying power associated with that effort? Service level agreements. What type of service do you expect and what should you get? Infrastructure obviously is key. What do you have out there today, right? We need to know it. Applications, very critical. While we don't want to take over your applications and whatever you're doing, we'll be glad to help if you need us to. We have some folks that can do that, but that's not part of this specific effort. But we do need to know what those applications are, because at the end of this, if infrastructure moves, we don't want to break stuff, right? And who do we call if it does break, and how do we get it back up? So that type of information we need. Procurement, once again, kind of goes back to the buying power for the state. If we all play on the same team, how can we get some benefits from procurement? Governance is key. We really need your buy-in on this. Rates kind of goes back to funding, right? We're going to be very transparent with all that. And then relationship management, you know, are we making you happy? Are you getting what you need at the end of this? So, you'll see, I got a little bit more detail on these slides. It's really kind of redundant, so I'll kind of hold off on that for a second, and I'll show you kind of what we're talking about as far as the next phase, which is the data gathering phase. So I'll move to a spreadsheet here and kind of explain this a little bit. So, when we started this effort, our team got together internally and with some customers and said, hey, what's a baseline information we need to gather to be able to get to the systems integrator to get them started and start scoping out this future state, right? Knowing that we may need to revisit this, but, you know, what do we at least need to start with? And that's how we settled on this. Now, I'm showing you a spreadsheet. There's actually an app that our team has developed to collect all this information, okay? At the end of this, and I'll pull the slides back up here in a minute, but at the end of this, we're gonna send you some information on how to log into that application, and basically complete it on behalf of your agency. So, I'll go through this real quick. I'm not gonna hit all the lines, but I want to give you an idea of the type of information you're looking for. And real quick too, one thing I need to say, I recognize most of you guys on this call, if not all, are pretty small as far as your numbers, right? So first thing is, you're still important to this effort. I need to say that. Second thing is though, some of this information may not be relevant to you at all. And you may be thinking, hey, we don't have anything, right? And I'm not part of this. And if that's the case, that's okay, but we still need you to complete this information. And basically just kind of go in and check no if that's the case for each of these situations. Now, having said that, it may be that you do have something, and you just haven't thought about it, right? If it's a licensing app, and you're like, oh man, it's just a little licensing app we host, and we don't have a server, it just kind of sits on a computer. We need to know that, right? And so let's identify that through this effort. And once again, at the end of this, I'm going to open it up for questions, because you may have several, so I'll get through this pretty quickly. But Missy Moorhart is on our team. I mentioned she joined us now, and she kind of leads the Enterprise Services Division, and her team developed this app. So I'll let her give you just a quick background on that.
Okay, we've put together a web application that will support the data that's gathered through this spreadsheet. Users will actually log in and enter their information. Have you gone through the spreadsheet? Sorry,
No,
I'm just
not yet.
coming in late.
Not
Okay.
yet, no. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, thanks. So as you go through this, the data that is identified through the spreadsheet will be entered into the AIMS tool. Every agency will have an agency administrator, and that agency administrator will be able to allow other agency users, if you need support personnel to help you key information. And then you can contact the DIS call center if you have any issues using the tool. But the tool is up now, and then once you're set up, if you're not set up already, you'll receive an email from the AIMS tool that will give you your login credentials.
That's it, okay. So I'm going to go through this once again at a high level, because I know you have questions and I want to hit those at the end. But you'll see, and like I said, this is a spreadsheet, so this is just kind of a representation of the tool, but the questions are the same. One of the things you'll notice real quick, if you notice on the left-hand side, we've identified a DIS team member that's responsible for that section as well. So if you get in there and you have questions and you get stuck, you can reach out to that team member and we'll get you the information you need to complete that. And if needed, we'll carve out some time to help you get that done. This first section is really kind of general stuff, and some of it will not apply. I'll say real quick, because most of you, we got a lot of questions in there around CAI contractors. Just if you don't know, CAI is Computer Aided International, which is a company that the state uses for staff augmentation, so contract work basically. And several of the larger agencies use these folks a lot. And so that's one of the things we're trying to gather through this. Now, I recognize that most of you don't. And so you'll see yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, right? So you probably don't have any of those folks on staff. That's a real easy entry. But if you do have somebody on staff that's doing IT work and supporting some of these things today, this is your chance to put that on there, and we want to see that. One of the things we're going to do through this is hopefully build a case. If we spit out this report and say, you know what, we've got X amount of infrastructure that should take whatever, X amount of people to support, and we look and see that we got half that number of people doing it, well, we need some help, right? And so that's something we're trying to gather through this effort. So if you're a bigger agency in this section, obviously that will be more relevant for you. Let's go through here. And we do have some things in here too, like, you know, how will you measure success as it relates to this project? What's that look like for you? Does that look like not having to worry about this thing anymore and my stuff just works and it's backed up and every time legislative audit comes over I can send them directly to DIS and tell them to handle it? Okay, we need to know that, right? Also, we're trying to identify any short or long-term goals you have, as it relates to IT, because that's one of the things we've done through this as well. We've seen several people have a specific need. Okay, let's all go in and do this together, right? So let's scope that out as part of this. This next section is related to the applications that you have, and you'll see Missy is the team member for this area, and I'll let her kind of explain what she's looking for there.
Okay, basically here we're looking for any kind of custom application or application that you're using that's specific to your business. So we're not looking for things like Microsoft Office or Adobe, but if you've got a custom licensing app or a specialized access database, things of that nature, this is where you would list them. And all of these fields may not be applicable to your application, but just give us as much information as you can, and that'll kind of trigger some additional conversation.
And you'll see there's a lot of questions here. Probably for most of you, most of these will not be relevant. But make sure you look through there because there will be some that probably are. I'll say right here, you know, is this a Microsoft Access application? For several of you, that will probably be yes, right? And so there may be some other leading questions after that. And I know several of you work with Lance, and some of you don't. You know, we've had several discussions with Lance as well. So
Donovan?
yeah. So we've met with him and our team, so he's very aware of this effort. I'll scroll, like I said, probably most of this information may not apply to you. If not, just make sure you note that in the app. The next section is related to equipment, and I'll let Debbie explain what she's looking for here.
Okay, well, as Donnie mentioned earlier, you know, we're interested in any critical applications that you host at your facility that serves your users and your customer base. So any information on those servers or storage systems that provide critical apps. There will be two possibilities for relocations. One's what we call a lift and shift, where we actually physically move the equipment from your facility to the data centers. So that's why we're asking for physical information about the equipment. We've got serial number, asset numbers, those type things. We have a data center infrastructure management system that we maintain. So we have an inventory of all of the equipment in our facilities. This is very helpful for us for planning space allocations, power allocations, those type things, also network connectivity. It's also very helpful for you when your auditors are trying to validate where your equipment is. So that helps a lot there. The other thing is if you have, you know, servers that could be moved, that are hosting applications that could be moved into our shared services infrastructure or virtual or VM environment that we'll have. So just give us information that we can determine if it's best to move it into the shared services infrastructure or if we need to do a physical move.
Thanks, Debbie. Next section is related to your network connection, and I'll let Rick Martin kind of explain what he's looking for there.
Okay. What I'm asking for is your WAN connectivity, how much bandwidth you have serving your local facility. Do you have additional bandwidth that DIS is not aware of? Maybe serving some back-end use that we might break if we relocate servers. I asked about remote users and local users. What is the balance of that? When we relocate that device, how will that impact your WAN connectivity? So by understanding the number of users and where those users come from, I can determine how it's going to impact your last mile connection. Then I also get into, in another section, your VLAN, use of VLANs, use of IP addresses. It's really easy for us if you've got all your servers in a VLAN and we remove all those servers at one time. We don't have to do any IP address changing on your location. We just move the IP addresses with the servers. So those are the kind of things that I try to understand is the impact on the network when servers are relocated based on where your users are.
And one thing I want to stress here is if Rick was talking a foreign language, That's okay, right? So if you didn't understand what he's saying there as far as VLANs and all that, that's what we're here to help with. And so that's why we've got a team member assigned to this. I know several of you too work with our desktop support team, Rose and her team. We can reach out to them. And so don't let that be a hurdle. Don't look at a question and feel like you can't ask, right? We recognize some of this stuff is not every day to you, right? Next section is related to storage. How much data do you have? This is pretty critical. Once again, we can help with that if you don't know the answer to that. As Rick mentioned, once you change kind of the location of the data, that impacts a lot of things. One of the things is storage, right? And our current storage model, we're looking at tweaking a bit based on the type of data, the type of storage retrieval you need. And so in the past, storage has been a little cost prohibitive, and that's one of the things we're really looking at through this effort to make sure we've got different tiers basically to meet your specific needs and your specific needs as it relates to cost. So this last section is related to the money, right? And so that's Amy. Amy Buss is our CFO. She's on this team. And first thing she's going to do really is look at your IT plan, because that's kind of a good baseline. So if you have that completed, that's good. And then she may also reach out to you and your finance folks to kind of say, okay, what's the cost of doing business today and how do we capture that? And how do we weigh that versus what it looks like in the future? So I mentioned, just to get it out there, we understand cost is an issue. And so we're not coming to you today saying, hey, you got to do this tomorrow, it's going to cost X, and sorry about your bad luck. We really want this to be a team effort. This is a project that the government supports. DFA Office of Budget is very aware of it, and so we don't really want there to be any surprises. We're not going to do anything, number one, without talking to you. But then if there's a situation to say, okay, we both agree, this makes sense, and we need to move forward, but we can't afford it, we have a couple options. Either that slows down your project timeline, meaning I mentioned 5 years, right? So it may mean that 3 years from now, you're ready to do this, right? And then we work with you and your budget analyst to make sure we plan accordingly. Or if you have an immediate need, that's something we can accommodate too. But we understand kind of the critical nature of the cost of this. And so just keep that in mind as we move forward, meaning we don't know exactly what that looks like yet. So, but we're mindful of it, and we recognize for some of you, the cost may be prohibitive, so we're going to look at all ways to kind of accommodate that. So, but we don't know exactly what that looks like yet, so bear with us. Just know that it's something we want to work together with you as a team to solve. So, that's the end of my spreadsheet. I'll go back to the slides real quick, because I did have a couple others, I believe. And so, let me scroll down to those. Hang on me. Okay, so this is, okay. I mentioned that we're going to send you an email with your information to go in and log in and put your data into the app. And so Mike put this together for us. This is kind of a representation of what that's going to look like when we send that out. So we want to give you a heads up so you don't think we're spamming you, number one, and so you can kind of be prepared for what that looks like. Also, I mentioned our team, and we'll send you this as well, but basically this is our team, right? And we want to assist with this effort however we can. And so you'll see this, and we'll send this out as we move forward. So real quick, I'm going to go back to here and make sure I unmute everybody. Okay, so we're all unmuted now, so we're dangerous. So I want to make sure, I know we went through that fast, so I did just want to make sure we were respectful of your time. We do have our team here, so I want to make sure you guys could answer any, or ask any questions you have, and we'll answer them to the best of our capability. So, but keep in mind we got about 33 people on here, so let's try to be mindful of that as well. So, who's up? Any questions? I have, well, I'll tell you this, one of the things that when we started this, right, state government looked like X. And when we end this, it's gonna look like Y. And so we as a team have really kind of struggled on how to deal with that. Just because, you know, basically we can only go with what we have today, knowing that it's changing. And so that's kind of been a struggle for us. And basically we're just moving forward as is. And as things evolve, we will change our approach. Bottom line is it's all got to happen anyway, and so the data has to be gathered, whether you're called X or Y or whether you report to a different agency. We still have to gather the data as it sits today, and so that's how we're approaching this effort. Now, having said that, through this tool, we're going to have a statewide view, and we're going to have a lot of information. We'll be able to run reports, and so if you are moving under a different agency or organization, and multiple of you are doing that, we should have information that's helpful to that effort as part of this. So, if you guys have any questions out there that we need to address today, keep in mind we're available obviously afterwards and through email. And Mike is our project manager. Really, he's going to keep us all on task here. So you'll probably hear from Mike occasionally as we move through this. I mentioned our goal is to arm that integrator with as much information as possible, and we expect him to be here in May. So, you know, we're looking at about a 30-day turnaround from the time we send you the application to when we're hopeful that you'll be able to fill it out. And for several of you, there just won't be a lot of information, but there will be some when we need to know that. So. Okay, last call for questions. Don't be shy.
You might minimize that participant list in case anybody wants to jot down notes of.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Well, I really appreciate you making time for us today. Once again, we'll be following up with you. You'll be seeing the AIMS tool invite, and then Mike will probably be following up with you routinely to make sure we're staying on task. Don't hesitate to reach out with questions. Really appreciate you making time for us today. Thank you.